Joining us now is the CEO of ERCOT, who I'm sure has had a very busy week. Mr. Pablo Vegas, thank you for joining us. Hope you're staying warm.
Thank you, Ryan. Likewise.
So just shoot it to me straight. How is the grid holding up this week? Is it performing as well as you thought it would last week?
It really is. And, when I say that the grid is performing well, what I'm talking about is the whole generator community that creates the electricity has been, working together really well, all the way from the pipelines through the traditional thermal power plants to the renewables, the wind farms, the solar farms, and to the newest technology that's on the ERCOT grid, the battery storage. All have been working together and performing really well over these last few days and helping to keep the lights on. In addition, we're seeing really good response from Texans as well. As you know, we requested conservation coming into this morning because of the deep cold that we're experiencing, and we saw that response show up this morning when we needed it. And so the combination of the really good performance on the power supply as well as the responsiveness of the Texans has really helped to keep the grid up and running well during this winter event.
I remember on Friday with the governor at the State Operations Center, you said that we expect the grid to be in normal conditions throughout the entirety of this event, and we're not calling for conservation notices. That was on Friday. Since then, you've called for 2 conservation notices. What changed over the weekend?
So basically what we've seen change is the weather. What we're dealing with here is a weather event that's coming through Texas. And the cold weather came in a little bit earlier than was being forecasted on Friday when we had that event. It came in earlier in the week, hitting on Monday much more significantly. And it also came in colder. So those 2 factors have driven the electric demand higher, and as a result, that's led to the need to request for conservation today and for tomorrow morning.
And when you do make that appeal, asking Texans to conserve, what kind of response do you see? Do we notice any meaningful change in the supply and the demand? Are Texans heeding that call?
Yeah, they really are. If you recall, we were showing a forecasted demand that was a little bit higher than what we experienced this morning, quite a bit actually. And a couple of big drivers for that. One of them was that conservation response. When we were watching the grid performance early this morning, 5-6 o'clock in the morning, we could see when we got to that conservation window, the increase in demand start to slow down, and the high numbers actually reduce as a result of businesses and consumers actually pulling back. And the other thing that we got the benefit of is that, this being a holiday, folks don't get up quite as early and at the same time like they normally do on a workday. So that helped to spread out the time of that peak today. But tomorrow's a little different, and that's why we requested a tighter conservation appeal for tomorrow between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. because tomorrow is not a holiday; it is a regular workday. Mm-hmm. So we do expect people to be getting up more around the same time and starting to use energy about the same time. Plus, it's also forecasted to be even colder tomorrow.
This afternoon, the Austin mayor laid out for residents here what it may look like if ERCOT does have to issue controlled outages or rolling blackouts. Do you expect any possibility that may be necessary this week?
We're not expecting that we're going to have to be in emergency operations or have to get to controlled outages. The mitigation steps that we're taking to prevent that have been very effective so far. The really good coordination across the electric generating community has been good. The responsiveness from Texans has been good. All of the power plants and that I mentioned are performing really well. So I expect we're going to be able to get through this, but we really do need folks to pay attention. And if it's safe and it's okay for them to do so, if they can help conserve a little bit in the morning as well, I think that's going to make a difference. Now, I know some people may be experiencing some local power outages. That could happen from, a car hitting a pole or just, something else happening in a local way. If that is happening, they need to contact their local utility company to find out what's going on with their power service, and they can get information on that typically at their local utility website or even on the Public Utility Commission of Texas's website can point them to that.
Yeah, city problem, not a grid problem in those circumstances, right?
Right.
Every time
right.
the supply and the demand on the grid gets a little too close, I notice that wind and solar are always the first scapegoats or points of blame because maybe the sun isn't out or there's less wind than we expect. But, of course, back in February 21, natural gas was also hindered by the extreme cold as well. Can you kind of break down how all of the different energy sources that feed our grid play into the overall supply and which are the most reliable this week?
Well, it's really it's a question of needing to have all of the pieces of the puzzle working together in order to get through an event like this. And it's really never in our intent to try to place blame on any one source of energy when we're having challenges or when the grid gets tight. What we want to do is just try to explain facts as to what's happening on the grid. And so, those facts can vary based on what, the season is and what's going on and what time of day it is. For example, during the winter, we're always going to see those peaks typically when the sun goes down and things get very cold. So, obviously solar resources won't play a role in helping to deliver energy during those peaks in the wintertime. And then, as we look at this week in particular, we really needed all of the pieces and parts to work together. So we needed the thermal power plants to be available. We needed the batteries to all be available and ready to go. And then wind is the main variable then that we look at that, just depends on whether the wind is blowing. For this event, the wind performance, the wind has been blowing a little bit less than what is seasonally normal this time of year. So that does help to contribute a little bit, but it's not blame. It's just a fact, look, the wind blows, sometimes it blows hard and sometimes it doesn't blow hard. But the windmills themselves, they've seen really good performance in terms of very little icing. So we haven't been losing the available windmills to that kind of an issue. So all across the board, the electric supply fleet has really been performing very well during this week.
Good to hear. Well, let's talk long term because this week we're feeling pretty comfortable, but every December, January, February, people are still anxious. Ever since that February 21 storm, every time the temperatures plunge, we start worrying: are the lights going to stay on? Am I going to stay warm? What are we doing as a state and as a grid in the next 5-10 years to make sure that maybe when the temperatures drop, we don't have to have this same conversation next year or the year after that?
Well, we certainly know a couple things are going to likely remain, true. One is Texas continues to grow economically, year over year. Texas is doing really well. A lot of people are moving to the state. Businesses are moving to the state. So that helps to drive electric demand up as a result of that, and requires infrastructure investments across the board. We've seen the state legislature take up this issue and finding ways to try to incentivize all different types of generation to get developed, including, thermal dispatchable generation. We're already seeing a lot of growth on the electric grid from renewable sources. We're seeing solar and wind growing on the electric grid year over year. We're seeing batteries growing very rapidly on the electric grid. We're seeing that every year, the additions of those resources, and they're making a big difference during the summers as well as during the winters. And so if we can add to that and balance that growth with some thermal dispatchable resources, which is what some of the legislation that was passed in the last session enabled and incentivized, then we're really going to be able to get to that place where we know we're going to be able to address whether it's the hottest day or the coldest winter without having as many reliability concerns as we sometimes do today.
Are we seeing any impact from those investments? For people who may be unaware, the governor signed a pair of bills meant to provide loans and incentivize power plants to come to Texas and build more plants. It could cost as much as $18 billion per some reports. Are we seeing any payoff from that investment? Any projects in the pipeline now?
Yeah, we've already seen some announcements made from companies that are going to start to build new gas-fired power plants as a result of that incentive that came through the legislation. The governor and I were just down in Houston a few weeks back, an announcement that Calpine made about an investment they're going to be making at their Freestone Energy Center. So it's definitely leading to companies making decisions to make investments and to help support the growing energy economy here in Texas.
All right, well, Mr. Pablo Vegas, CEO of ERCOT, I appreciate you taking the time and keeping us informed.
You bet, Ryan. Thanks so much, and appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.